Live from Fezziwigs, this is Derailed Trains of Thought. Hello there, Timothy.
Hi there. How you doing, Nick?
Very well. I'm okay. Maybe it's just I don't want to jinx it, but we've had some nice stops lately. I mean, last time we were on the Muppet Theater, which life's
awesome.
Dream, and now we're here in Fezziwigs, and at their Christmas party nonetheless.
It's pretty awesome, honestly. I mean, and I have to say, you look pretty nice in your top hat there and your Victorian duds.
More top hats, the better, is what I say.
Oh, absolutely, and bow ties. Bow ties are everywhere.
Bow ties and cravats.
Yeah,
but bow ties are better. Yes.
It is a very merry place. The only thing that can make it better is if they had some rubber chickens around.
Yeah, well, you can't have everything.
That's true. You can't have everything, but Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes, Merry Christmas, audience.
We hope you enjoyed our epic, long 50th episode.
It was quite the adventure.
It was
more for Tim than for us.
It was very adventurous, but it was fun. No, it was fun.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
And now we're back on our normal. So don't expect 2 hours tonight.
Yes, and no echoes, hopefully.
No. Boom, boom, boom.
Gotta try to shake off the
Well, have you noticed here? There, everyone's having pretty much fun, but there's that one guy who's like trying to do the books or something.
Yeah, he's kind of a stick in the mud.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll have to talk about him later.
Behind his back.
Yeah,
that seems like
very
a very
Christmassy.
festive. That's part of Christmas, right? Hanging around people you don't care all that much about.
Yeah, talking behind him. Yeah, I mean, you get the whole family together and, gossip away. So, yeah. Okay, well, I don't think...
That went in a weird direction. All right.
A lot of eggnog here.
True.
All right, shall we go ahead and start with our story school?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Christmas is obviously about, trees and bells and lights and other things, but normally it's also about Christmas, as in Jesus being born.
Yes.
And so Tim and I thought tonight we would talk about redemption in stories, since this is, a topic that comes up quite a bit in at least traditional Christmas stories. Mm-hmm. Not as much in some of the newer ones. And I thought we'd probably start with kind of that classic A Christmas Carol.
It is the definition of a, well, in a sense, it was the one that created the genre, you could almost say.
It's, quite old.
Yeah, it is quite old.
Now, he's wrote some other Christmassy sort of ones, right? I've not read the Cricket on the Hearth or what.
Yeah, that's one I think that's, well, at least it's considered a Christmas one. We've got this book at my folks' place that's like Charles Dickens, a Christmas story collection sort of thing. Just started it, and it takes place in the winter. But I couldn't tell you that much more about it, honestly.
I don't think I've read it yet. But everyone's seen some version of the Christmas Carol. They've done it like
everyone has their favorite
20
version.
times.
Yeah. We've talked about the Muppet Christmas Carol
which
here
is
before.
Probably my favorite version, because when the cold wind blows, this is when we need Zach. Actually,
I think we got our fill of him last.
Well, okay, that's true.
No, it was great to have all the guests on last time.
It was very merry.
Yes.
So anyway, we thought we'd start with the Christmas Carol as kind of an archetype in many ways of kind of a Christmas story.
Yeah. And
also kind of a redemptive arc in a story, and one that most people buy.
Actually, full disclosure here, I think we had talked about before possibly doing redemption for a Christmas episode before. I don't remember. I feel like that was something we talked about once, but early in the days of the podcast, when I was still at a Christian film school, I was a little tired of the subject of redemption because it came up a lot.
Yeah.
Because it is a very important thing for the Christian faith, obviously. But, part of the reason we're fascinated by it is it's really beautiful, but it's not always easy to tell that story in a convincing way because, if you do a redemption story in kind of a hokey way, people are like,
whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
And so the modern sensibility is more to do like this half-hearted, half kind of changey thing. There's hope in the future somehow.
Hence, one of the reasons why the animated version of The Grinch is far superior to the live-action one.
Yes.
Where it's kind of like, the Grinch had a point. Those Who's are kind of jerks and blah, 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 blah.
It's been a long time since I've seen the live one.
Yeah,
I don't remember much about it.
That's just what I've seen bits and pieces of it, but that was kind of the impression I got from the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And certain parts, like it goes to the Grinch's backstory and things like that, which A Christmas Carol also goes into Scrooge's backstory.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I guess we can start talking about Christmas Carol. Well, I guess first we should start talking about Scrooge himself.
Yes.
Because Scrooge is a tough nut.
Yes, he's a tight-fisted, mean, crotchety old man.
I'm trying to think of some of the lyrics from when it calls, "That blows, it chills you to the bone."
There's nothing in nature that feeds your heart like years of being alone. Some old hag sings that.
Yeah.
Better than I do, but...
More despised than any in the wrath of many. This is Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay, anyway, we won't go into the singing the whole song, but the point is, he's the guy that no one really likes.
Yes, and because he really doesn't... He has no compassion for anyone. He has, he's very utilitarian. Everything, get rid of the surplus population, which doesn't sound too far off some society planners nowadays.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, that's a great line because it's one that you can at once be horrified with and at the same time sort of look at yourself and because sometimes poor people just seem inconvenient to us, unfortunately.
So they really set him up, first off, that it's not like he's a misguided man. He's a bad man.
Yeah.
Everyone tries, his nephew tries to offer him and be nice to him. And all these people try good things. And there's this time after time where he's just like, no, humbug, and this and that and the other thing. So, I think part of redemption, you got to establish, first off, that something's wrong.
Yeah.
Which seems like saying the obvious, but you have to actually not just like, it's wrong, but I don't really believe it's wrong. Like, no one likes Scrooge at the beginning. Mm-hmm. He's not a likable character in any real sense. He's not like he's one of those curmudgeon, like, oh, he's really good, but he's not.
Right.
He's just
yeah,
me.
No, he needs fixing.
Yeah, he needs fixing, and he doesn't really know it.
And I wonder if that is one thing that we miss in a lot of modern redemption stories, in that you can have people who are damaged goods, but there's, it's a lot harder for society to pin down that something is morally wrong. I mean, we've talked about that on here before, but that's an element that maybe doesn't get as outlined as well.
Yeah, because there's really hardly anyone in that first, section that much cares for. Even some of your good people like your nephew and Mr. Cratchit are, they deal with them, but they're like, he's kind of a lost cause,
right? Yeah, and then that's where. Basically, it takes, and this is something that I think is also very missing in modern redemption stories sometimes. And again, some Christian stories can take this the wrong way, but it's interesting that for Scrooge, it takes divine intervention for him to begin changing.
And I feel like the more powerful redemption stories, if the guy's actually broken, wrong, twisted, whatever, you need some sort of powerful outside force to jerk him
awake.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have to be a divine influence necessarily in a story, but it certainly is very helpful.
Now, didn't you say there's one of Dostoevsky's stories that basically the whole book is trying to bring the character to a point of turning?
Crime and Punishment, is all 600 pages of it, is largely, the first 100 pages where he commits his crime, and then like the next 500 is basically being racked down by guilt and impressions. And then there's this, I think her name's Sophia, it might be wrong, character who comes in and kind of is like the Christ figure in some ways. Mm-hmm. And kind of, it's a case where he doesn't feel like he did wrong, but his conscience keeps pushing it. So I guess it's an internal version of the ghosts.
Okay.
In many ways. And then like the last couple of pages, and then, this started his this is highly summarized, not how it's written. But this, from now on, then he had been, would be his journey in his faith. Like he had come to a point where he could actually accept faith, that he'd, so it's the whole point though. Yeah, the whole point was getting to recognizing he was wrong and that he needed something, and then in that case, because Dostoevsky's Christian, of faith in Jesus, and then that's like a whole nother. Dostoevsky said that's a whole nother novel,
Well, and that always struck me as interesting. You not having read it, just hearing that summary, that strikes me as a very realistic sort of depiction. If you don't have this kind of divine intervention, it takes people years to push past their own baggage, get pushed past themselves in a sense.
In Les Mis, you have, the divine intervention is basically the priest.
Oh, yeah.
It's giving the candlesticks back, and that, that's kind of the spark that changed Jean Valjean, but most of the rest of the book is him wrestling out what does this look like in real life. There's the point where someone else is charged with his crime, and he's like, do I go? I have this good life. But he decides he has to go there.
Yeah.
And then when, Cosette starts falling in love with Marius, then he's like, do I give up the one thing in my whole life? So most of Les Mis, not most, it's a giant book. But like the first, the conversion happens relatively early on.
Yeah.
But then most of the rest of the book's working out, what does this look like?
Well, and it's really interesting, too, the comparison with Javert in that story.
Yeah.
Because Javert is very works-focused.
Yes.
It's like you work, you have to obey the rules, follow these lines, you go these guidelines. He doesn't really believe that much in grace, even though the evidence of Jean Valjean's having changed is, basically everywhere on anything he touches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet Javert won't see it. And not until basically his life is saved by what seems a miracle of this extending of grace.
And then he kills himself because he can't deal with it.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like Scrooge, if he gets with the ghost of Christmas future, sees his grave, says, oh no, I'm wrong. I can't do anything about it. I'm going to just jump in this grave. I mean, it's like you get to that point where either you accept the change and that you're wrong, or you say, I can't accept that I'm wrong, and self-destruct.
Yeah.
And Javert is very interesting that way.
He is. He really is. I think a lot of people would see him as the. I guess you could say he's the personification of religion as an institution gone awry.
It can very well be that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that even Christians are always struggling with, this battle between truth and love. And in the end, I think the cross does show that it's a balance between love and truth. And I'm getting this all muddled, but because you can't, you have your Ron, who's that pastor out, and the pastor that said basically the hell that doesn't exist.
Oh, Rob Bell.
Rob Bell, yeah. You have got your Rob Bell. It's all grace.
Yeah, it's all grace.
Yeah, but then at the same time, then I don't know if there isn't truth, then grace doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, it is very much that the whole between a holy God and loving God.
Yeah.
How do you justice and
Right.
mercy? And what's interesting about Jean Valjean is many times he'll be like, look, I will pay the price of this, but let me do my mercy first.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too. I think that's one of the strengths about A Christmas Carol is that it does, by going into Scrooge's past, you do see how a lot of the ways that he turned out was just a series of choices that he made to put money ahead of his marriage and things like that.
It's interesting. It's one of those cases where, flashbacks nowadays tend to be very much used for helping us reevaluate characters. Lost did that all the time.
Yeah.
But often in our modern sensibility, always like to explain how they got that way, but almost in the sense that it's excused or like, of course it would end up that way.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that
it's like if you went through these situations, you would do this too.
Maybe it's just me, but I never got the sense that Scrooge was. Yes, he had circumstances that pushed him ways, but he also made choices. I mean, you get a sense that it's not simply environment made him this.
Yeah.
You get a sense that it's environment and things he decided to do.
And that's an important part of the story of recognizing your role in all of it, and then now that you've kind of established that, then where do you go forward? And that's where we get the Ghost of Christmas Present, which is a very interesting one in terms of a redemption story. Because we often don't focus on the present as much when it comes to sharing the good news, the gospel.
Yeah.
We do a lot of focus on this is what happened when Adam and Eve came, the fall of man, inherently sinful, all this stuff.
Anyway, future Revelation.
Are you going to heaven or hell, or what sort of thing? But it's easy to get lost in the details of the present. Now, for Scrooge, it was a lot of coming to terms with what other people are like.
Actually seeing a mirror for the first time, really a mirror of what people view him as.
Yeah.
In some ways.
And I think there is a portion of that does happen for actual people when they're first learning about the Christian faith. Because people can have so many wrong ideas of what the church is really all about until they get to start getting to know people at a church and realize, oh, this is what this is like. And that's, that can be very instrumental in that sense. I don't know if I can think of very many other stories necessarily that, not off the top of my head, that really focus on that as much.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah. But
you have a little bit of, okay, not quite, but it was interesting. It's a Wonderful Life is almost the reverse of Christmas Carol. Because in many ways, that's where I'm trying to say you're not as horrible as you think you are. Which is an interesting twist in many ways. Like he's kind of like a relatively, exemplary sort of person, but he can't see it properly. Like redemption in some ways is like being able to finally see properly who you are.
And that is an important moment or important point too. That a redemption story is not always just about a completely lost person like Scrooge. Sometimes it is about someone who has been going on a good path and yet,
is lost.
They take a wrong step. They go take a wrong turn, or in George's case, it's not even that. It's not necessarily that he made mistakes that got him into the suicidal state that he was in. It was just kind of this accumulation of life kind of beating him down.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like that. You really do need just the reminder of who you are and your place in the universe, which sometimes can appear very bleak and really doesn't have to be.
Because in the third part of, Christmas Carol is basically, and here's where you're going.
Yeah.
Which, like, the Muppet Christmas Carol, that is frightening. I mean, that Muppet is one of the scarier Muppets I've seen. It's basically Dementor before Harry Potter ever existed.
At that point, he's not really a Muppet. He's more of a creature.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I think Muppet Christmas Carol is probably the closest the Jim Henson Company, or ironically, because it was after Jim Henson passed away, but it was the closest their company came to kind of melding all their interests, because you had your Muppets being silly, and then you had your creatures like the Ghost of Christmas Past, and then all the spooky setting and very realistic. I mean, there's the same cinematographer who did Muppet Christmas Carol also worked on The Storyteller.
And you can kind of tell that,
you can see that once you realize
that helps a lot, actually.
Yeah, there's a continuity there, and so anyway, that's a fascinating thing about that movie, and I just got completely off track.
But so I mean, for Scrooge, most of his journey was learning who he was and what the consequences of that were. Mm-hmm. And then what happens then is he doesn't just like say, I'm sorry, but he's actually vastly different afterwards. I mean, he's still Scrooge. He's still
gonna be a moneylender, yeah.
And he's still a little crotchety to a certain extent, but he
knows how to play with it with his own self. He has a much deeper self-awareness than he ever did before.
And I think sometimes, like, you get action movies where you're like, the main character's all has these demons, and and he's going to redeem himself, kind of the phrase, but it's not so much he redeems himself, he's trying to balance out things he did in the past.
Yeah.
In many ways. Which is, I guess, is in many ways a more modern sense of the redemption story. It's not so much that I'm changing, it's that I did bad things previously, I'm not really a different person, but I'm going to make better choices, make good choices.
Yeah. Which is ironic, because it almost does, in that sense, it almost does become another sort of works-based sort of redemption.
Yeah.
I was telling you the other night, I thought it was really interesting. On Once Upon a Time recently, they had a discussion with the Queen, Regina, who's taken a lot of, she's gone through quite a long redemptive journey of, in her case, it basically was instigated by her adoptive son.
Yeah.
That basically she wound up wanting to become good for his sake. And in the process, also kind of wanted to become good for realizing that she had made mistakes and et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting because her son really made her see herself as the evil queen and what that meant. As opposed, before she's like, I'm an evil queen. Aha, I'll just be that way.
Yeah, because you pushed me into this and basically blaming everybody but herself for what she was doing. But yeah, since then, she kind of got this outside perspective that she would actually listen to. And she's gone on this great journey. But then there was this interesting conversation that she was having with Snow White saying, well, is it really good if you're just doing good things to try to, for karma, basically?
Yeah.
Is that really good, or is that just kind of working the system sort of thing? Which is an interesting question, and not one that I'd seen very many in the secular realm who deal with redemption stories really ask.
Actually, the Henry thing, her son thing, remind me, the other thing about Christmas Carol is that it's initiated by people he trusts, by Marley. It's our people. I'm doing the Muppet version where it's people. But Marley says trust that
a person.
Yeah. I mean, because you do almost need having that relation, that close person you care for. That was the only person Scrooge cared for in his whole life, almost, except for the girl he almost married.
Right. Well, and in the Christian faith, I mean, unless you're really, really desperate and start crying out to God because you don't have anywhere else to go to, a lot of people, if they don't believe in God, that's not how they're going to be introduced to him.
Yeah.
They're,
through actual people.
Yeah, it's through actual people. I mean, that's why the church is called the body of Christ, because we are his representatives.
So what do you think we can learn from the Christmas story about making our own redemption stories? Because you're right. A lot of times it can come off hokey, especially if you come from a very, because there's different levels of how realistic people do it. If you're writing a fantasy realm, it's going to be different than writing a conversion story for a fiction.
Yeah.
For a Christian fiction
like
book.
modern New York or
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always like to say about my characters, I need to break them, which is basically what the Christmas Carol is.
Yeah.
It's a giant breaking of Scrooge.
It's true.
And then you have to pick up the pieces, and because another example in Christian fiction, but more fantastical, is Eustace from in Dawn Treader, because it's that whole he turns into a dragon, which is kind of his seeing himself different, as people see him. He starts hearing people talk about him, stuff like that. And then it's that painful, and it's always painful. Redemption's always painful.
Yeah, and I think that's an important key. I'll clarify this in a second. But redemption shouldn't be too easy.
Yeah.
Not to say that you earn it, because obviously grace is a gift. It's a miracle that God just chooses to give to us. But at the same time, getting a person to a point where they are saying, I want to be different. This is who I want to be. If you're going with the full Christian story, I place my life in God's hands. Getting a person to that point is never easy.
and I wonder if that's sometimes, and I have not seen a lot of, what people call hokey or cheesy redemption stories. But I wonder if sometimes if it is, the drama's not there, from a art point of view. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we're saying it's hard, it's difficult. That's inherently drama.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're converting it into fiction.
That's true. I'll give you, here's an example of what some of my peers, when I say peers, film school people would think is hokey. Facing the Giants, which my family likes a lot. I know there's
I
a lot.
I've seen that one.
There's a lot of Christians who like Facing the Giants and the other Sherwood Pictures movies, but that movie loses like any real sense of conflict by about halfway through, because it's about a dad that basically decides to start taking his Christian faith more seriously, starts teaching his football team about some of these things, and they start winning more games. He gets a raise, he gets a new car. It's like, put your faith in God and he'll start doing these great things in your life. Which may happen, but it's bordering prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
It doesn't really go quite that far into that territory, but it's definitely kind of going on the sense of your life will become much better if you just kind of stick with it and do these things.
Yeah, and it just seems too neat.
Yeah, it does. It does seem too neat. Now there might be some people listening who would disagree, but that's why there's a lot of Christian artists out there who don't like those kind of movies.
I've not seen it myself, so I was just interpreting your words. But
going with a secular story that does redemption very well, let's talk about Zuko.
Okay.
Because Zuko takes a long time.
From The Last Airbender.
Yeah, Avatar The Last Airbender. He takes a long time. I mean, basically the first season, he's kind of a stick in the mud, but at the same time, they do a story pretty early on. You're like, oh, well, he's a really interesting person. They go into why he acts the way he does. And then in season 2, he has this one conversion moment where his uncle, who's basically been working on him this whole time.
And that's the thing. You got a close associate working on the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And basically he convinces him not to do this one bad thing. And at first it appears like this is a conversion. I mean, he even like goes through kind of this a metamorphosis. He's just like where he feels like sick because he's done something that's so contrary to his nature. And you think, aha, he's changed. And then he betrays his uncle. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought, but that's the thing. Sometimes a person like starts taking the steps to change and that old nature just comes right back.
Yeah. And not only is it realistic, it's great drama.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
And then, like, even if I remember correctly, when he gets to like season 3 and he actually starts,
and he's like, why am I so bad at being good?
he fully recognizes, like, wait, something's wrong here.
Yeah, it's like this is not an easy thing for him to. I mean, he really is trying. Like when he's trying to like basically get the heroes to accept him. Yeah. But it's not easy for him, and that is good drama.
Yeah, it is,
and it feels real because no one just changes overnight.
So Star Wars. I remember I was in this logic class with Cordovan. What's his first name? I don't remember. But anyways, or maybe it was his book I was reading, but the redemption of Darth Vader, he says, is very weak. And from what we're saying here, it doesn't meet most of the criteria.
Yeah.
It kind of just happens.
Well, you do have the one criteria, which is the person that's close to you.
He does have that.
He obviously really wanted to be.
I mean,
with
there's some
his son.
struggle, but I suppose you get the flashbacks, 20 years later in the prequels and stuff. So you saw that he had stuff, but it does have, I like it, but it does, you do sometimes get redemptions that happen almost because they need to happen. And that one,
I think it's arguable that there might have been more in Anakin and Vader underneath the surface that Return of the Jedi just doesn't get into, because that's not the kind of movie it is. I mean, it's interesting when I've heard of stories where parents have shown their kids Star Wars the first time in the order of 4 and 5, and then goes to the prequels 1, 2, and 3, and then see 6. And I think that would give.
I think it probably helps a lot more because you have a lot of.
Yeah. Well, because not only do you have it's interesting to think about the moment Anakin first turned was right when the Emperor was when Palpatine was doing a Force lightning and killing someone, and now it's interesting to think about him doing it again to his own son.
His own son, and was the only remnant of the one thing he besides his mother he really loved.
Yeah.
So yeah, there certainly has been expanded with the prequels, but I think movies sometimes they have to take the shortcuts because the whole story is not redemption. Christmas Carol, you got the hour and a half, 2 hour movie that's just doing that with a character. And, if it's just one of many things going on, sometimes it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Sometimes, which is unfortunate. I mean, you would like to, you would like to see it a little bit stronger, but
sometimes I think it's become, in some types of movies, shorthand.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to explain all the changes. They're just like, he used to be good, he turned bad, he had some connection to a friend, and then at the last minute he decides not to kill.
Right.
So-and-so.
And in an action story, you can almost say that it's part of, you're in these very extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the phrase battlefield conversion, that's understandable where that comes from.
We just had basically a redemption in Once Upon a Time. And we just watched with the Ice Queen.
That's true. Yeah, that happened very kind of spur of the moment, but
it was kind of set up. I mean,
it was set up. You could kind of see again. I think it kind of went back to for her especially. There was this trigger moment where basically her whole world changed.
Yeah,
and then when she realized,
we kind of reinterpreted the trigger moment in many ways.
Then that changed a lot her whole perspective.
But it does seem like many times. Not always, but you see many times in drama, there's usually 1 or 2 climactic moments. I mean, there's things like Crime and Punishment where it's more this slow burn, for a long time. But that's not actually very common unless you have a whole story that's made to do that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we better wrap this up.
Oh, okay. So redeem your characters. Good luck.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
So yeah, but no, I think it is valid to say,
And it's neat drama. I mean, it can be that in itself can be a very powerful, done well story.
Yeah.
I think if you're good enough to combine that with other things in some sort of massive epic of 10 books of 1,000 pages, it could be really, really good stuff.
Because a long, drawn out redemption story can be enjoyable too.
We don't have time to mention Lost, but there's a number of
which
actually
I should throw in here real quick. Because I thought about this before. The series Naruto just ended.
Oh, yes.
Or Naruto, depending on how you say it. I think the anime purists say Naruto, but anyway. I was talking about it with my sister one time, and she was pointing out that there are almost too many redemption stories in Naruto. And this is a very Japanese thing, all the villains have some sort of reason for why they do something. Yeah. They're very, the whole Shintoism, very all beliefs are kind of equally valid depending on how you look at things and so like that. And the first couple, cool, but it did seem like every villain or every antagonist eventually had some sort of even if it was just a small moment of redemption before they died. And as Rachel put it, real life doesn't work like that.
Yeah. I'd like to see it sometime. And some people really like that in their drama. Yes, everyone's good at the last minute. But
yeah. Use it.
I'm sure we could talk more, but we better.
Yeah, we better move.
It's really a manner of trying to make it real.
Yes,
and I think,
and make it real within the context of your story.
Of the world. And I think Christmas Carol was one of the popular ones that you can borrow stuff from.
It's you can almost, well, I don't know if I don't want to overuse the word eucatastrophe, because not every happy ending is a eucatastrophe, but there's a lot of, it's a really, really good ending.
Yeah.
So
now time for soundtrack. All right, for my soundtrack today, apparently at one point on the Dreamcast, there was a video game called Grinch, The Grinch. And, obviously that's The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And I thought, hey, okay.
I think it was probably based off the Jim Carrey movie.
Yeah, it looked like it from the screenshot.
Yeah.
I never played it. Apparently no one's played it because, people couldn't even find, the judges couldn't even, find a good file to compare it to. But...
well, it was on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, true.
Which actually, they say the Dreamcast was a good system, but it was a movie tie-in game for a system that not very many people had.
Yeah. But anyways, this is called Whovian Waltz. Not Doctor Who, but
Whovilles.
Whoville. And it's remixed by Brandon Strader. And it's
very Nightmare Before Christmas.
Christmas, yes.
Yeah.
So enjoy. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I really like the sound of that one.
Yes.
Pretty enjoyable.
Very unique.
Very unique. I guess then we'll just jump straight into our take
On Tales.
So, okay, well, we originally thought about talking about strictly Christmas programs and things we hadn't seen that we just recently seen.
Yeah, because we like talking about Christmas specials on here around this time of year for our December podcast.
But I hadn't actually seen any new ones yet because for the first time in quite a while, I saw a lot. I saw like 2 movies in the theater like back to back. Oh, not, like I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I don't get this summer I didn't go to hardly any movies.
I know.
Recently, I've seen like all kinds of movies.
Yeah, so we realized we might get more material, or at least Nick might have more material for an end of the year thing.
And we figured there's a lot of good movies that have just been out.
Yeah, which now we will get to a Christmas special that is new for me at the end of this discussion. Yeah,
so we're not completely forgetting Christmas, but Christmas has turned into let's release all the movies that could have come out in summer, but we wanted to wait.
Yeah. Well, although a number of these came out in November too.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah.
Namely, I think the first one you want to talk about was Interstellar.
I'll take Interstellar. Yeah, okay. I really. Well, first off, just if you haven't seen Interstellar, you should probably go see it.
Yeah,
it's probably can't anymore by the time this comes out. Maybe, somewhere.
Probably. Yeah, hard to say.
Anyways, Christopher Nolan, which I've enjoyed most of his stuff.
Mm-hmm. I was bugging Nick to see this, guys. I knew it'd be up his alley
because I always tell Tim and other people like you don't get that many good classic science fiction movies anymore. And you got a lot of like space adventure stuff, like they're basically comic books in space.
Yeah,
which I enjoy as well.
Oh, sure,
but it's just 2001 you have, and then Stargate kind of tried to be
Alien,
something like that.
Sort
Alien kind of is. Yeah,
I don't consider Stargate.
Well,
fiction.
Not anymore. But I remember back in the '90s, I was desperate for any sort of sci-fi.
Oh,
so like Stargate, let's go watch it, and it was fun. But Interstellar was very enjoyable. I thought I really enjoyed it. I think the one downside, I guess, is if you're expecting sort of your mind to blow up like watching Inception, it's not quite that sort of movie.
No, it's not.
And
that.
you go in just thinking it's just kind of a space exploration movie, and done very well. I mean, all the actors do a good job. We get to have fun with relativity, but I don't watch a lot of. I don't watch a lot of really long movies. But this one didn't feel. I didn't mind the almost 3 hours, and it's very very thematically dense, which I love.
Yeah, I felt like once or twice that it could be a little tighter, and one was like when the last times they were on the spaceship. It was like another scene of them on the spaceship and like really having to do this really difficult maneuver.
Oh yeah,
hopefully,
I could see you cutting that or trimming that. Yeah,
I don't know even that particular scene was bad, but it was just like. You had done it a couple other times in the movie, and having already seen Gravity, just a year ago, it didn't feel quite as fresh. And it's like, okay, we're doing another one of these scenes. I mean, I enjoyed adult swear in the movie. It was just a little overdone.
But I mean, it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, hugely ambitious.
And I love Christopher Nolan many times. He'll just throw lots of ideas out there, and it's not. A lot of movies are kind of single theme. Like they'll have certain catchphrases that'll come up over and over again. They kind of like different characters will use in different.
Well, there was that one poem that Michael.
They did use that an awful lot, and that was one of the main things. But there's a lot of. It's very if you want to use polyphonic in many ways. There's a lot of different themes. And some of them are more main than others. There's things about, human beings as explorers as versus just reacting to things. There's ones about what is the nature of mankind. I like that where they're like going to space. Like, I think Anne Hathaway's character believes that nature's not evil, just man,
Yeah.
But man's going out to space, and there's at least one instance where
he is evil.
Yeah, he is evil.
Or he's messed up. He's fallen.
That's fallen. Fallen mankind is part of the game, and this is just part of. I guess there's a book written about the science of Interstellar, which I'd like to read, just because I guess most of it is theoretically possible. Not that it's easily possible, but it could be.
One drawback potentially about it being what was it polymorphic? What was the word?
I said
polythematic.
Well, I said polyphonic because that's
polyphonic.
Music.
Yeah,
that's music.
Right. Polythematic is a good term for it, but I was a little more on the fence about. I mean, I definitely loved the ambition. I loved the ideas. I was really looking forward to this movie, and I overall enjoyed it. But it was one that I was like afterwards. I was like, that was an experience. I mean, it is, but I couldn't put a finger on entirely what I felt about, because I wasn't like head over heels in love with it. I think partly because, talking about polythematic, it is very strange, and I think this was kind of a sticking point for some people. That, you get this mix of like hard science fiction about what it's like to live in space and the relativity stuff and all that weird kind of thing, and then you've got this concept of love being the fourth dimension,
or at least a higher dimension,
or a higher dimension, or something like that, which is interesting. Like in stories where that's set up for that sort of thing, like say Doctor Who, obviously I go with that. It's like, yeah, sure, that sounds awesome. Green Lanterns, you've got a whole emotional spectrum thing of like emotional powers and all this kind of stuff. Cool, I love that kind of stuff. For this, it kind of threw you a little bit, because like, it was a really weird line. It was because, and that's one of those things, talking about redemption, that like, do something just right and it's meaningful. Do it the wrong way and it sounds hokey.
Yeah.
And wasn't quite sure where I felt about it for a long time.
It was interesting because I was thinking about this. A lot of classic sci-fi is very humanist and believe in God or whatever. Mm. But they almost always, in their stories, pull off something to bring mankind to a higher level. 2001 has the monoliths that bake you into a star child. And, Babylon 5, despite
realistic for the most part,
has the first beings are kind of, and the four lines are kind of angels, that
the whole idea that evolution eventually leads to this higher state.
And that's very, very common in science fiction writers, that even the hard ones, that they're grasping with the edges of science and trying to, like Christmas Carol, they want an outside influence to raise mankind up.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting because it's very common. And I think that the love as a higher dimension thing is an interesting version of that. And I guess that sort of stuff I kind of just take as for granted in science fiction. Because I read a lot of Asimov. Asimov has one about the end of the universe, and this computer reboots the universe by saying, let there be light. And, there's all kinds of that sort of stuff. And it does come in the movie, though. It does kind of come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
At least Anne Hathaway's line. I mean, you got kind of the bond set up with the father and daughter,
right,
very strongly at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think in that first discussion thing, I was like, okay, this is like, I could tell right away, okay, some people are not going to buy into this, but I was kind of like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Yeah. But then I had that one scene where he does go into another dimension. And if you haven't seen this is hugely spoilerific. So you may want to skip ahead. But the whole bit where he's basically manipulating his past to basically communicate with his daughter, it was a little, that's where I was really like, this seems like it's trying to, put too many dominoes in motions. Like, if you're going to try to communicate with this way, why just communicate with this way? It felt a little bit too much like, here's all this stuff I set up, now I got to, put it. And that's when you're like, the whole seeing the puppeteer's strings thing.
Well, I mean, but he's communicating in gravity. That's the whole point of learning the fifth dimension, that you can actually interact with gravity in a new way.
Yeah. Which, anyway. That's why I say I'm on the fence. I can sort of see both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that scene, my only real complaint about that scene, I thought it went a little long. I thought, it's one of those scenes that I think is hard because you needed to make everything tie together, like, a lot of dominoes set up for it, but simultaneously, depending on how astute you are about understanding the science and the filmmaker's signs, you might not need as much explanation. I think. And plus, you have to not care about time paradoxes.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, no matter how you do time travel, do you think this is a better version or this is a better version? Do you think you can change time, which is kind of weird? Or do you think you can't change time, which is also kind of weird because then you do things before you do things?
Yeah.
And, I could argue either one.
I think Doctor Who tries to play like both sides.
Yeah, and Doctor Who's like, whatever we want for this story. But
well, like, there's certain things that have to happen.
We'll be like, Back to the Future is like, oh, you could just change stuff in alternate universes, split off, and Lost is like, it already happened. You can't change it. And that's what, spoiler, that's what Interstellar largely does.
Yeah, I guess basically it is.
And although it sets it up largely saying you can't change the past. I mean, she says that.
Yeah, although it still does create that time paradox, even though because what he did is what wound up sending him on his trip in the first place. But anyway, so that's there's a lot of stuff about Interstellar,
and it's a very discussable movie. Like, I don't know that it's a perfect movie, but it's it's a movie that I think it is an experience to watch.
Yeah,
at the very least. And I think also because it like the end is a good ending, but it's not like, if it was a single thing, it'd be like da da. But this one, you're like, but what about that? Or was this really the best way? It's a very discussable movie,
and it merits a second viewing.
Yes, which I have not seen, but I think it's certainly
and I do get annoyed with people online that like, because they didn't understand something, it becomes a plot hole, quote unquote, which is not accurate at all. A lot of those things.
I think not that they're not necessarily plot holes, but my guess is Nolan knows where there are. Well, I read an interview. He's like, I know where my plot holes are and where they aren't. And and I think there's probably not as many as some people think.
Yeah. I think, and I've said this before, but I think it's better to go on the side of I missed something. Maybe I'll pick it up on a second watching, as opposed to the filmmaker didn't spell it out for me in black and white, so therefore it's wrong.
I always start with the presupposition that the writer knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
and maybe he doesn't, but I'd rather start there.
Yeah,
than have to be conned into believing he knows.
Yeah, give him the benefit of the doubt.
And I will say one thing about this movie. From my whole family went to watch it. I think it was much more emotional. I mean, it can be very emotional, more so than some of Nolan's stuff, I think.
Yeah, probably.
I know people had wet eyes and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Not me, but yeah, other people. It hit close to home certain scenes. So
yeah. I can guess.
It's very relentless.
Yes, it is.
I was sitting next to my sister, Summer, during one scene. She's like, I can't stand this. Like, she was nervous because it just moves.
Yeah, there's a lot going on and doesn't linger. I mean, for being a relatively, I don't know if I could say quiet movie.
But there's not action scenes.
Yeah,
really.
Not necessarily. Yeah. No, I mean, it's very deliberate in what it's doing, but it definitely feels like there's a lot.
It's ratcheted up. Okay.
Anyway,
moving on. Yes.
Yeah. So
what do we do next? I saw Mockingjay. Did you see Mockingjay?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now you've read the books, and I have not read the books. So what's your impression?
Well, it's been a while since I read Mockingjay. I believe I read it before the first Hunger Games movie came out. And I'll be upfront. I think my favorite book in the Hunger Games series is Catching Fire, actually, because it's got the launch of the rebellion, and it's still got the action kind of stuff, and it's the most hopeful in the sense. And then whereas Mockingjay, found out the rebellion is not really all that great in some ways, and it goes into the whole war is awful kind of stuff, and it doesn't feel nearly as it's not a happy story, which I've argued this with Rachel before, but it does fit with the overall tone of the series.
Natasha's like, when she watched the movie with me, she's like, it was a well done movie, but it's just like the book, which is
uber depressing.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, it's not that happy.
Right. Yeah. And actually it didn't strike me. I mean, I think I tend to get more emotionally invested, which is ironic because I've said before on here that movies are more emotional than books. But I think I got a little more emotionally invested in the book just because you spend more time reading it and you're in that world a little bit more. But it's interesting. A lot of discussion on this movie that people got so hung up on. This is because they split the book into two parts, which I don't know. I kind of thought the slow pace worked for it. It's interesting. We're in a time period now where people used to complain about, the book didn't or the movie didn't have all these things that the book does. Yeah. Well, now okay, we'll give you an extra movie, so we'll give you more time. And then people complain why are you're just milking this for money and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, again, I can sort of see it. But at the same time, it is interesting that it's not like this. Some people, I think, were complaining that it's a slower paced movie than the others two were, which it is. But it kind of works.
I like the pace. I mean,
it makes the movie what it is. It doesn't make it like another fast slam bang thing. Yeah. It makes it kind of this idea of this movement that is slowly, because real life things don't just happen really quickly. It takes a movement a bit to kind of build itself up.
Well, it seems, from my impression from the outside, that the Hunger Games movies have done a very good job staying very. I mean, they're very well done. Very, they don't seem to be going for cheap money necessarily. And I think Suzanne Collins is involved in the scripts and stuff like that. I mean, to a certain extent.
I didn't get the sense of, and we've complained about The Hobbit being a bloated movie series. It doesn't feel like that at all. I mean, it feels like everything is in this movie in Mockingjay for a reason and not just to pad it out.
And even though it was slow, it didn't feel like it was wasted time or I think it was just. you're just giving space for emotions and ideas and stuff.
I think part of the problem is that the expectations. People think this is a YA thing. You know, if this movie was not based on a YA book, if it was just a famous director that people liked, I think a lot of people would have a different opinion on it if it was like an independent movie sort of thing that moved into space.
And the thing is, I had no impressions going in. I knew nothing. So I wasn't hoping for big action scenes at the end, or I didn't care. What I liked about the movie is the kind of thematic wise. It really fascinated me to see this kind of dueling propaganda. This, like I try to explain that, it's very interesting to be watching a movie about people making a movie, and not just it's not like you're watching the Muppet, when they're making a movie, but it's like you're watching them purposely use real emotions to
create
emotions. And you're watching a movie that's doing the same thing and showing you how it works.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting to watch a movie self-consciously knowing that.
Yeah. And it does kind of create some questions about, okay, we've had these other movies that basically were very, anti-propaganda.
Yeah.
The way the Capitol basically was trying to manipulate emotions and all these kind of things. And yet then here the good guy is basically doing the same thing. Is it good? Is it bad? In the book, it kind of comes off as, not a good thing. Katniss is like, this feels way too much like what I did with the Capitol. In the movie, I don't know that I got the same vibe I was weird. It's like, maybe I should be feeling, maybe I should have red flags going on, but at the same time, it is for a good cause.
Yeah, see, I got a little unsettled by it. Like, obviously, the PETA Capitol side felt way worse.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But the Capitol, especially when, what's his name, Plutarch?
Which
Philip
one?
Seymour Hoffman.
Oh, yeah, I think it's Plutarch, yeah.
Especially when he talks, you see it's completely emotionless. The planning of it.
For him, yeah. It's all about the selling.
And is it right to do it just before it's for right reason? And it's very interesting to watch, Katniss's true emotions basically being co-opted.
Yeah.
And it's good to make people feel true things, but what is the purpose? Yeah, it's an ambiguous. It's ambiguous in the movie, but it's unsettling.
Yeah,
and I think thematically that's why I enjoyed it, because I'm like, oh, this is kind of a neat thing to see put on film.
Yeah, well, and I think the unsettling things will be more apparent in the second movie.
That's right here. Yes.
Yeah. And again, that's one thing that people like me that kind of likes the ending was frustrating for some people, where like it was not a. I mean, the ending of the Hunger Games series is one of its strengths and one of its weaknesses, and the whole war is not usually a clear-cut thing. Yeah. There's not just a right and a wrong side, and they're like, yeah, okay, I guess that's true, but
do I want to read about it?
Grumble,
grumble. All right.
So yeah, that's what
you saw Big Hero 6. I have not.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Okay.
No. But you can go ahead and talk about it.
Your mom saw it.
Yes.
Well, Rachel talked about it a little bit last time.
Oh, that's true. I guess she did. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to say. I mean, it's a really fun movie. I came out of that movie a lot happier than I came out of Mockingjay.
I can imagine so.
It's a happy movie.
I saw someone, one of the old students from Taylor Upland, saying that she used to call Frozen Tangled on Ice, and that Big Hero 6 was How to Train Your Robot. I don't know anything. I just thought it was funny. I haven't seen it, but
I could see that. I guess the only other thing I'd throw in is that if you feel that superheroes, comic books sometimes gets too dark, this is a movie for you.
Okay, cool. I need to go see it at some point.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have time to mention The Wind Rises?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I have to. Actually, unbeknownst to each other, we both recently watched The Wind Rises.
Yeah, I just saw it like over the weekend.
I saw it Friday. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even know I was going to see it. And like Libby just texted me, he's like, "Hey, I saw this is on DVD. Should I buy it?" I'm like, "Okay, if you want."
Anyways, if you don't know, The Wind Rises is Miyazaki's last film. Apparently, I mean, I know he's claimed to be
claimed to retire
times,
before, yeah.
But I think it's more certain.
It feels
normal.
Yeah, it feels more certain. I mean, this movie feels like a movie that an old man would create. I mean, it's very introspective, kind of looking back on interestingly, it's a biopic. I mean, these are some real people that it's about.
And it's interesting for Miyazaki. There's the fantastical nature is very down. I mean, there's some dream sequences, and even those aren't
No,
way
those
out of
aren't-
line.
No. I mean, Studio Ghibli has done sort of these slice of life dramas before, but they've never been. This is the first one that's been directed by Miyazaki.
I read somewhere that he had originally written a manga
yeah.
for that was the Wind Rises, and then someone convinced him to do the
Yeah,
anime.
which is interesting because that was I think that was the same thing that happened with his first movie.
Oh, really?
Nazca of the Valley of the
which
Wind.
is like it's the only one I haven't seen.
Oh, you've never seen that?
I think it's the only one I've never seen.
Oh, weird. That's like a post-apocalyptic Princess Mononoke.
Cool.
Is kind of what
I'll
that
take
is.
that.
Yeah.
But it was the Wind Rises is about this young man who's nearsighted, and he would love to fly planes, but he can't because he's nearsighted, and so he becomes an an engineer for planes.
Engineer for planes.
I was trying to think of the official term. Aeronautic? No, that's not right.
Aerodynamic.
I don't know, something like that.
It might be aeronautic.
But basically, it's all about. I mean, it's a lot of planes. I mean, very.
Yeah.
I mean, Miyazaki obviously knows his planes.
Well, apparently, I think his father was an airplane engineer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Someone was telling me and looked up and was like,
But it's very interesting to me. It takes place in early 1900s. Most of it in the late 20s, early 30s. Did we get to that far?
It's
right before World War
probably,
II.
I believe so. Yeah, I think probably by the end it'd certainly be in the 30s.
And it's very interesting. He has a lot of commentary on Japanese culture at that time and how they were kind of backwards technology wise. And it's called The Wind Rises because the quote at the beginning is, "The wind is rising, you must find a way to live." So the whole idea is kind of when the wind rises is kind of this idea that things are going out of your control. Events are happening.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you live? How do you find a way to live in that sort of situation? War's coming. Your girlfriend has tuberculosis. There's an earthquake, and there's a lot of just this character finding beauty inside a world that isn't necessarily most people would find beautiful.
Yeah.
And just visually, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. I read on Wikipedia that Miyazaki said one of his inspirations for the film was something that the man that was about said. It was that all he wanted to do was make beautiful planes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those wind up becoming used for war. Which is something that I want to say they wrestle with, but not really wrestle. It's more like they acknowledge.
Yeah. And it's very interesting for Miyazaki, but normally he's kind of blunt about his anti-war.
Well, he's more blunt about it in his personal remarks than he is in his movies, I'd say.
Well, but you get a good sense, like in Howl's Moving Castle,
That's true. He's very upfront about this dumb war. And
or Castle in the Sky, there's kind of this pacifist
I suppose
thing.
so.
I know personally he's more.
I don't know that I'd say it's much more because it comes out across a couple of times.
But I guess I was surprised. No, they hardly said anything besides like a couple of remarks, like, "Well, it's the weight's going to be a problem. Maybe we just won't put the guns on it."
Yeah, and then everyone starts laughing. Yeah, right.
But it's a very introspective, like Tim said. Almost European. I watched it with my friend Brian, who was on the podcast last time, and he thought I had tones of Kurosawa.
Yeah, I felt similar. Like it felt along. In some ways, people have said like Princess Mononoke or Spirited Away is their most Japanese one, but this is closer to Japanese like old black and white cinema that I've seen than any other Ghibli film. Well, I guess I got echoes of Grave of the Fireflies sometimes.
They're not so brutal.
No, not nearly so brutal or depressing.
I don't know. I just fell in love with the movie. I just really liked it.
It was beautiful colors. Miyazaki, and
it's just a very subtle movie in many ways.
Yes, very much so.
I had watched Spirited Away earlier, and there's as many themes, probably more stuff moving around, but it's very...
That one's jam-packed with stuff.
Yeah, and this is just... Yeah, it's like a biopic. It's just slow, and it's a little bittersweet at the end, but you really get the sense of of a man just focusing on the beautiful things in life, and not on what they're going to be used for, what the end is inevitably going to be, both in his personal life and in his work life.
Yeah, that's another reason why I said that it made me think very old man kind of looking back on. Interesting that there's one shot at the very end when in his last dream sequence where he sees the planes flying up into like all the other planes. It felt very much like a callback to Porco Rosso, where there's another scene like that. There's a lot of echoes of Porco Rosso in this whole movie because it's about airplanes. Because Miyazaki loves airplanes.
How he does flying.
But it was
the animation is just amazing on that sort of stuff. And
but it was really interesting because he doesn't necessarily call back to himself a whole lot. But that one, it looks very similar. I think they were even going in the same direction that they were in like the dream shot in Porco Rosso. And some people have said that Porco Rosso is in some ways, before this maybe, was one of his most personal movies, kind of because Porco himself is kind of this grouchy kind of guy, but at the same time has this like wink in the eye humor.
It's very interesting. One of the lines was like, "An artist is only good for 10 years," and I thought it was very funny coming from Miyazaki.
Yeah,
who's been doing it for quite a while.
That's a good point.
But yeah, I if you remotely like Miyazaki or more literary anime, is very very good.
Yeah, it's very very good.
Okay, Tim, so your Christmas one, let's wrap up with this
Which
thing.
actually fits in very well with this, with talking about the Sodom thing. For a long, basically ever since I first started reading biographies back in high school about Jim Henson, this special is one that came up a couple times as one that was very important, both in terms of his company technically and the things they did. It was the first time they collaborated with Paul Williams, who would later write music for the Muppet movie and Muppet Christmas Carol. The special I'm talking about is Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. Again, like I said, important for some of the Muppet performers, considered it one of their best works. There's a certain segment of the Muppet Jim Henson fandom that really loves this thing, and I never gotten around to seeing it, partly because I'd heard that the versions that had been released before had been edited for various things. And I was like, well, I'm going to wait till there's like a definitive kind of cut. And finally, after like 15 years or whatever, I realized, okay, I'm just going to have to make do with what's out there. Actually, then after I watched it, I looked up on YouTube, I realized, oh, okay, you can see, because basically this thing was first introduced with, and it was kind of bookended by Kermit, kind of introducing, and he had some narration. But later, because Jim Henson Company owns this thing now, but so they cut all the Kermit stuff out of it. So anyway, with all that kind of pre-knowledge of it, it was almost too much to really, there's a lot of expectations kind of for it to live up to. And it's a very quiet piece, actually. I mean, it's easily the slowest production I've ever seen that's a Jim Henson production. Like, it's very, very low key, very folksy. It takes place on, I mean, like, all the music is very like folk music. Like John Baylor would probably really enjoy this thing. And the first, 10 minutes, there's not even necessarily that much of a story. You just follow Emmett Otter and his mom as they go into town to run errands, and they talk about how, basically not doing very well financially and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like 1920s. The time period is very vague, but it's all meant to feel very kind of old-timey. But eventually there's this talent contest thing where there's a prize that they both want to win so they can buy a cool Christmas gift for each other, separately, of course. It's almost Gift of the Magi, but in a weird twist, and I don't know how I feel about it, in a weird twist, each of them wound up sacrificing something of not their own, but of the other person, so they could so they could enter this contest and, win them a Christmas present. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Interesting.
But, yeah. So, and that was one thing that I wasn't sure entirely what I felt about the message of the whole thing in general. And that was one thing I was worried about too, because again, talking about how like, these Christmas specials or whatever can either feel like really meaningful or hokey. I was a little worried just from some of the music I've heard from it. It sounded very like kind of secular spiritualism, you know what I mean? This kind of like we're all humanity kind of thing, which sometimes the Muppets and Jim Henson kind of did, and sometimes it really works and sometimes doesn't for me. And so I didn't know what it would be. The first time I watched it was probably not in the ideal environment because it was when like a bunch of siblings were around, and really this movie you need to sort of expect it to be quiet. But at the same time, it doesn't have like the same kind of like bright, colorful imagery that Miyazaki would. In fact, like because it's all very folksy and the colors are all kind of muted, and it's because it takes place in the winter. And so it doesn't have some of the, unique cinematography, but at the same time, it is very interesting from a technical perspective. It was one of the first times they did big set stuff. Like there are some times where you see puppets like walking around, and like one of the long sequences when Emmett and his mom go into town, they're rowing a boat.
Oh.
And so, and it cuts back and forth the close-ups of where they're hand puppets, and then sometimes where they're actually on this huge set with actually this really long river that they created. And you've got these like remote-controlled animatronics that, he's really rowing the boat along the thing. And so from that perspective, it looks pretty cool. But at the same time, then you also have some like marionette work, which is not nearly as convincing.
Yeah.
This special was filmed in between seasons 1 and 2 of the Muppet Show,
Okay.
so that kind of gives you an idea of where it falls in timeline-wise. And so a lot of it was very important in developing techniques and, again, the relationship sort of thing. I feel like I kind of need to watch it again sometime to kind of see what, confirm what I thought about it. Because like I said, there was way too much kind of build up for this thing that I don't know that I could really have the same emotional connection that a lot of people have for this special. But if all that sounds interesting to you, it might be worth a look.
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Any question? Is it a classroom? No. No, it sounds interesting. Is that the same band that shows up in the Muppet Show sometime? Jug?
Actually, no.
Okay.
As far as I know, these characters never appeared in anything else, although they did make, years and years later, there was a stage adaptation made, like performed up in Connecticut somewhere.
Oh, odd. Okay.
Yeah. Which I guess was like a mixture of puppets and live people.
Oh, interesting.
There's some pictures on the Muppet Wiki if you want to look it up.
Okay, I might have to do that.
So,
cool.
Yeah. And it's available. I know it's available on iTunes. It might be available on Netflix right now. That's something, Netflix availability goes up and down. So who knows?
I might have to look into that. Okay. Cool.
All right. So that's your unusual Christmas special.
Yes. So those are the good, bad, and the ugly of the holiday viewings. Mostly good.
Yeah, mostly good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nothing bad, actually.
No, it's not a bad experience.
Levels of goodness.
Yeah. So you have to go into Emmett Otter with a certain level of expectation,
Yeah.
I think, for you to really.
I go with nothing, so I'd probably.
Yeah. Like your littler kids might be kind of bored because it is. There are some very stretches where they basically they talk and they stop and sing basically, and even some of the more upbeat songs, they don't necessarily. There's not like fancy camera work or really anything uber exciting going on. But
No, it's interesting. Random side note. It seems to me that the downsides of the internet is now everyone has 10,000 expectations before they watch anything.
yeah, it's true.
And there's a lot to be like Interstellar went in knowing basically nothing.
Yeah.
Wind Rises went in knowing basically nothing. Mockingjay went in knowing basically nothing. And
that's
maybe more enjoyable that way.
Sometimes that's the best way to be.
Like with the whole new Star Wars thing come out, I'll probably watch trailers that come out, but I probably won't try to hunt down anything else.
Yeah. No, I don't like hunting down too much information, that's for sure. But we got to wrap this up because we're running long and we got a long soundtrack at the end here.
Oh, yeah. Tim decided to almost go Glowworm Jim-esque.
Well, Nick had such a weird Halloween-y thing. I was like, I got to have something that sounds a little more Christmassy.
Yeah. Mine's always a little untraditional. So.
And I didn't have time to find anything shorter.
So should we do our... Okay, I guess give your intro and then we'll do our... contact first?
We do contact info
Okay, fine.
first.
We'll do that with today. So you can get a hold of us at derailedtrains@gmail.com if you'd like to email us.
Man, I got a tickle in my throat now. We got to finish this up fast. Our website is derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
You can see us on YouTube is that Derailed Trains of Thought as well? Or just Derailed?
I always forget because I'm signed in on my computer.
Okay.
So,
if you look up Derailed Trains of Thought, that'll come.
just type that in, you'll find us.
And
also
then-
mixler.com/derailedtrainsofthought.
And subscribe to us on YouTube. I mean, iTunes.
Oh, you should subscribe to us on YouTube too.
And Stitcher. And anything, yes.
All right. So this song is another remix by Brandon Strader. Completely coincidentally.
We did not plan that. We both watched Wind Rises at the same time. We both picked Brandon Strader.
Things are just aligning right. It's a remix from the game Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, and it's called One Up. And it is starts off it kind of mixes in between acoustic and techno-y, but it does have some Christmas stuff in it. So hope you enjoy.
This has been Nick.
And this is Tim. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Happy New Year.